Medieval warfare wasn't all glory and honor. Sometimes it was pure disaster. In this video, we'll look at the worst battlefield defeats of the Middle Ages. Moments when powerful armies fell apart due to bad planning, overconfidence, or just the wrong move at the wrong time. These battles didn't just end in blood, they changed history. Number 1. Hattin, a holy disaster. The Battle of Hattin in July 1187 became one of the most decisive and damaging defeats for the Crusader states in the Levant. King Guy of Lusignan made the critical mistake of abandoning a strong defensive position at Sephoria to confront Saladin near Tiberias, where Saladin had deliberately staged a provocation. This maneuver drew the Crusaders into a dry, exposed landscape in the middle of summer, without guaranteed access to water. The army was heavily armored, ill-prepared for long-distance movement in such conditions, and burdened by poor logistical planning. Saladin's forces took advantage of this vulnerability by cutting the Crusaders off from key water sources, including the springs at Hattin. As the Crusaders camped near the horns of Hattin, their condition rapidly deteriorated. Saladin employed a mix of psychological pressure and environmental tactics, setting fire to surrounding dry grasses and enveloping the enemy in smoke and heat. Dehydrated, exhausted, and confused, the Crusader army could not hold formation. Their cavalry was ineffective, their infantry disorganized. Saladin's troops surrounded and overwhelmed them methodically. Many knights, including members of the Templar and Hospitaller orders, were killed or captured. King Guy was taken prisoner, while Renaud of Chatillon was executed shortly after. The symbolic loss of the True Cross, believed to be a relic of Christ's crucifixion, further demoralized the Latin Christians. More than just a battlefield collapse, Hattin revealed structural weaknesses in the Crusader military system. Over-reliance on heavy cavalry, poor supply chains, and internal political fractures. The defeat left Jerusalem virtually undefended, leading to its fall later that year. In strategic terms, Hattin signaled the end of Christian military supremacy in the region and demonstrated how tactical patience, environmental awareness, and superior coordination could overpower even elite forces dependent on traditional chivalric warfare. Number 2. Agincourt, mud, arrows, and pride. The Battle of Agincourt, fought on October 25, 1415, during the 100 Years' War, is often cited as a classic example of tactical miscalculation leading to overwhelming defeat. The French army, which outnumbered the English significantly, some estimates suggest 3-1, entered the field with confidence rooted in chivalric ideals and the belief in the superiority of heavily armored cavalry. However, the conditions on the battlefield did not favor traditional knightly warfare. The field was narrow, bordered by woods on both sides, and had been soaked by recent rain, turning it into deep, clinging mud that made movement slow and exhausting. The English, led by Henry V, positioned themselves defensively, using sharpened wooden stakes in front of longbowmen, who were trained and strategically placed on the flanks and center. The French assaults were uncoordinated and relied heavily on frontal charges through the mud. As they advanced, they came under a relentless hail of arrows from thousands of longbowmen, who could fire rapidly and with precision. The arrows did not always pierce plate armor, but disrupted the formation, killed horses, and forced dismounted knights to advance on foot through terrain that quickly turned into a killing ground. The compression of advancing waves, slowed by the mud and blocked by fallen bodies, created chaos. Men at arms were packed so tightly they could barely raise weapons. Some suffocated under piles of corpses or drowned in the mud. What made Agincourt especially devastating for France was the loss of a large portion of its noble class. Hundreds of knights and several high-ranking commanders were killed or captured. The psychological impact was immense, as it exposed the limitations of aristocratic military traditions when faced with professional, disciplined, and strategically positioned common soldiers. Agincourt didn't just challenge French pride, it marked a shift in warfare toward ranged weapons, flexible tactics, and the decline of the dominance of heavy cavalry on European battlefields. Number 3. Manzikert, the fall of a power. The Battle of Manzikert in 1071 was not just a battlefield loss. It marked the unraveling of Byzantine control in Anatolia, triggering a series of internal and external crises that would ultimately cripple the empire. At the center of this disaster was Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes, who launched an ambitious eastern campaign to reclaim territory lost to the advancing Seljuk Turks. Despite commanding one of the largest Byzantine armies assembled in decades, the campaign was plagued by fragile cohesion. The army itself was a patchwork of professional troops, regional levies, unreliable mercenaries, and politically hostile factions. The chain of command was undermined from the start by mistrust among senior officers, especially between Romanos and members of the Doukas family who had their own interests in weakening his reign. Romanos' decision to split his forces and move ahead with only part of the army left him exposed. As he approached Manzikert, he believed Sultan Alp Arslan was in retreat, but the Seljuk forces were in fact close and strategically positioned. The Byzantines advanced into unfamiliar territory without sufficient reconnaissance. When contact was made, Alp Arslan employed swift cavalry maneuvers, archers on horseback, and flexible hit-and-run attacks designed to wear down the static Byzantine formations. As the battle intensified, betrayal struck from within. General Andronikos Doukas, commanding the reserve forces, deliberately withdrew at the most critical moment, leaving the emperor's core force encircled. The collapse was fast and total. Romanos was captured by Alp Arslan, treated with surprising courtesy, then released. But his return to Constantinople did not restore stability. Civil war erupted almost immediately, and Romanos was deposed and later blinded. The significance of Manzikert lies in its long-term consequences. It opened the gates of Anatolia to Turkish migration and settlement, undermining the empire's economic and military base. The loss of veteran soldiers, territorial control, and imperial credibility was devastating. This battle shifted the strategic map of the region and proved how vulnerable a centralized empire could become when internal politics compromised military unity. In the broader context of medieval warfare, Manzikert stands as a cautionary example of how political infighting, logistical overreach, and overconfidence in numerical strength can combine to erase centuries of imperial dominance in a single day. Number 4. Golden Spurs. When peasants crushed nobles. The Battle of the Golden Spurs, fought near Kortrijk in 1302, defied the prevailing assumptions of medieval military dominance as an urban militia of Flemish townsmen, composed largely of artisans, tradesmen, and common laborers, defeated a professional French feudal army led by experienced nobles and knights. This confrontation wasn't simply a military encounter, but a reflection of deeper political and social tensions. Flanders, at that time a wealthy and semi-autonomous region, was under growing pressure from French royal authority. The French crown sought to consolidate power over the rebellious Flemish cities, which resisted not only politically but also economically, as they controlled valuable textile and trade routes. What the French high command failed to consider was the degree of preparation and discipline that had emerged within the Flemish militia system. Although lacking cavalry and noble lineage, these militias were trained to fight cohesively on foot, familiar with their terrain, and deeply motivated by defense of their local autonomy. The battlefield selected by the Flemish near Groningen was narrow, marshy, and unsuited for mounted charges. The French knights, confident in their traditional superiority, launched frontal assaults assuming they could simply break the line through brute force. But their horses were slowed and destabilized by the terrain, and the advance fell into disarray. The Flemish had prepared obstacles including sharpened stakes and pits, which broke cavalry momentum. Once dismounted, the knights were overwhelmed by densely packed infantry armed with pikes, goodendags, and axes. Over 1,000 French knights perished in what should have been an easy victory for the crown. The battlefield earned its name from the large number of golden spurs collected from the bodies of slain nobles, a grim symbol of the shifting power balance. The defeat shocked Europe, as it demonstrated that massed infantry, properly led and supported by favorable terrain and tactical discipline, could neutralize even the most elite cavalry. More than a singular event, the battle signaled the gradual decline of feudal knightly warfare and hinted at the future role of infantry and professionalized armies in reshaping medieval military strategy. Number 5. Grunwald, the Teutonic collapse. The Battle of Grunwald in 1410 was a turning point not only for the Teutonic Order, but for the entire political structure of Eastern Europe. Known also as the Battle of Tannenberg, it brought two rising powers, the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, into direct confrontation with one of the most disciplined and militarized religious orders of the medieval era. At the time, the Teutonic Knights had grown beyond their initial religious purpose, evolving into a powerful military political entity with fortified strongholds, territorial ambitions,